What hobby makes you immediately think this person grew up rich? My grandfather was a country club type of guy. My uncle, who's incredibly wealthy, has the hobby of building and flying his own airplanes. There are apparently kits, but he has also bought and repaired little two-seater planes that went down. Hey, my grandpa also bought a little two-seater plane that he fixed up when I was a kid. My mom refused to let us ride in it because she said it looked like it would have belonged Fred Flintstone. Because of the lack of a floor, it's harder to push if it ever gets off the ground. Yabba dabba doo. You wanna die? I know several people who work at a desk, but got their pilot's license just because. I was amazed at how affordable it was to get a pilot's license. Considered doing it, but I know I would hate not being able to rent a plane. Because that shit's what's expensive. Yeah, it's not too bad, but still quite expensive as a just because hobby. The ground school isn't terrible. Honestly, it's a few $100s online or closer to 1k in person. You need at least 40 hours flight time. Most people average closer to 55, 60. Half or more of that time is going to be with an instructor at an hourly rate. Plus you need to pay for plane rental fuel. Typically it's around 110, 124 hour. Depends on market and fuel costs. So let's estimate 1k for ground, 6k for plane, and probably 20 hours of instruction at 45 hour 900. That comes out around 7900. I'd round up closer to 10k for a private pilot's certificate. It's not richy rich status, but it's definitely above most folks' reach. Fine art collecting. It takes serious money to even consider going down that path. Also a certain type of education. We have a Goodwill overstock store that sells stuff the regular Goodwill couldn't sell for cheap. Original oil paintings turn up frequently for $5 or less. They aren't fine art, but they are art. Some are cool. I got a badass original oil painting for like $35 at a Goodwill. The artist is fairly well known. The value is irrelevant to me because it's awesome and original. Polo. Years ago, I worked for Wrigley Gum Company, now owned by Mars, when it was still owned by the Wrigley family and William Wrigley Jr. was the CEO. My second day, I ran into Mr. Wrigley in the elevator, but didn't know who he was. During our small talk, it came out that I trained BJJ still very new in the US 20 years ago, and I ended up asking him what sports he played. His response: "Oh, I play a little pickup polo from time to time." I can't even imagine how the heck a pickup game of polo might materialize. I can't imagine a dozen or so billionaires out riding their favorite polo horse and just happen to run into one another at the park. They can go through more than one horse in a game. Sometimes 5 horses. How does one go through a horse? Like, do they change them out when they are tired? I have questions. The game has 4 quarters called chukkers, and it's normal to have a different horse for each chukker plus a spare, so you're carting around 5 horses to each game. The vibe I got is that it's considered cruel to use the same horse for more than one chukker the same day. They get pretty lathered up. Rich. Polo. Super rich. Elephant polo. The hardest part about elephant polo is getting them in the pool. Gocketing. Not the kind at arcades and stuff, but the real kind. It's how you get into Formula 1. That shit is expensive. I had a 500 twin-engined Gocket that I ripped around the track every so often, but we go in cheap free as a mate did some work there. You see these kids rock up that probably would rather be somewhere else with these overbearing fathers who are trying to live their dreams through the kids, screaming at them for just having fun and not knocking it off their lap time. The setups, the gear, and even the vehicles they transport their carts in are stupid money. We used to take their tires as they would one race and burn them, but they still go for ages just fine for us. Recreationally, if you just want to do it as a fun day out and hire, it's still expensive. You see these kids rock up that probably would rather be somewhere else with these overbearing fathers who are trying to live their dreams through the kids, screaming at them for just having fun and not knocking it off their lap time. The setups, the gear, and even the vehicles they transport their carts in are stupid money. Change a few nouns and you have just described pretty much any youth sport. Source: I coach a 10U tournament baseball team. And to be fair, Most of the kids at that level genuinely want to be there, but I can point you to at least 2 kids on my team that are there to make mom and dad happy, and for no other reason. These are also the kids with the most expensive gear and sub .100 batting averages. Tim is not going to become an all-star hitter with that 350 bat if he dives out of the box on any pitch that looks like it might be a little inside. That was my exact experience with golf. Loved the sport casually when I was young. I enjoyed the tournament the local course ran. It was basically a summer camp with prizes for the best golfers, and my parents assumed that I wanted to play competitively. I got a set of very nice clubs and was enrolled in a bunch of golf leagues that were pretty competitive, and it'd be shit. Like we'd drive 2 hours to a course where I'd play 18, then spend hours waiting for everyone else to come in to see the scores. It was all very competitive and I hated it. I just wanted to drive 15 minutes and play a casual 9 with my grandpa. It slowly killed my enjoyment of the game to the point that until this summer the last round I played was almost 8 years ago. Growing to enjoy the sport again, but playing competitively really killed my love of the game so much. Anything that doesn't match the climate of where they grew up. If they grew up in the desert, but they are ace skiers, then I assume they had the money to travel a lot and own all the gear, etc. Edit. I should clarify my statements are based on my experience in Australia. I was unaware that Yank geography had so many places you could ski close to deserts. In Australia there are only about 2 places you can do it, and it's super expensive. It was much cheaper in Europe, which is why I learned there. But growing up, the only people I knew who did it regularly were super rich. I live in the desert and have a ski area 15 minutes from my house. But yes to the general premise. Taos says hello. Horse dressage for sure. I know some middle class folk who own a horse or 2 on a farm, but if you're riding in competitions, you're likely wealthy. If they are under 30, aviation. If they are over 30, heck, probably still aviation. I've wanted to get my private pilot's license as long as I can remember, but goddamn that hobby never stops needing loads of money. I can have like 5 other fully realized hobbies for the price of shoestringing that one. Falconry. You'd think, but my poor ass uncle-in-law somehow climbed a tree and stole a falcon egg, then raised it from hatching. It would hunt rabbit for him, squirrel, etc. And yes, that would be dinner. I was gonna say Magic the Gathering, but turns out it's my imagination limited by poverty. Magic can be really cheap to get into. You just have to pick the right format for your budget. Collecting and driving sports cars. My fiance was telling me a story about the exchange students that lived with them and how they were so nice and would help take care of the house. I asked her why her exchange students stayed with them for so long, when all my high school exchange student friends had only stayed for a semester. It was at that moment she realized that she grew up with Swiss nannies. My family lived overseas for a while and my dad's company paid for a driver and 2 maids for us. There wasn't a lot of middle class living there. You either lived in a big house made of steel and concrete meant to withstand typhoons, or small structures that could be easily rebuilt if the storms blew them down. Philippines. This sounds exactly like how my ex described her old family home. Apparently the walls and gates also helped keep out would-be kidnappers looking for a quick ransom. Anything involving owning a horse. True. Definitely the fancy styles are a good indicator. But then on the other side you have people that live in absolute squalor because they have nothing after funding their horse pets. This is basically my grandmother. She's always been a free spirit kind of person, which I respect immensely. But this also means she owns and loves her horses and will remain poor while keeping them. To say nothing of her need to own no less than 4 dogs at any given time. At one point, if I remember correctly, she even lived in the attic above the stable. I didn't know if I loved that or pitied her for it. That being said, she taught me how to ride, and that was lots of fun. Wish I could do that more often. She seems to love taking care of her horses and doesn't regret it at all. So I say more power to her. Karting. Hunting humans on private islands. Yeah. The rest of us have to be content with hunting humans on public islands. Selling. I love seeing people defending so many of these activities as not being rich people shit. LOL. But then they mention some very specific reason why they were able to do the activity for a decent price. People say racing. But I regularly raced at the best circuits in Italy because my uncle is the Lord President of Rome and he just bought me all the stuffs. I don't know why people don't try having rich relatives. Gonna be honest. A lot of hobbies when you get into the top tier of things get very expensive. A lot of stuff mentioned here can be done on the cheap with ingenuity and passion for the hobby sport. For me, it's when a person starts a new hobby and buys the nicest equipment. That's when you know. All the kit. Can't do shit. I study classical ballet and tell interested people that if they enjoyed their audit lesson, to start with basic off the peg gear. If they truly love the experience to the point where they take class 3+ times a week, then we can talk unnecessary premium leotards and later, custom performance tutus. Mountain climbing in remote places in the world. Went to a work mandatory motivational speaker whose spiel was climbing Everest 4 times starting at age 22 and other mountains in Africa, Europe, and Asia. Guess I did not land the correct job out of college. Most winter sports. That gear ain't cheap. Scuba diving. Then they name all the places in the world they've scuba dived. As a diver, I can firmly say our sport has 2 categories of divers. You have tons of rich asses who dive maybe once a year in some wonderful tropical location they flew to, but suck at the sport because they rarely ever practice. These are the kinds of folks who will show up with thousands of dollars worth of gear, but can't remember how to put it on. Conversely, there's also a big contingent of divers who are more working middle class, and who dive wherever the heck they can locally. They usually don't have the most modern gear, but they get a good amount of practice in whatever lake, river, pond, or other body of water they can access locally. It still isn't a cheap sport, but doing a few days of diving a year gets a lot less pricey when you're not flying to another country for it. Fencing. Going to space while wearing a Dumbass cowboy hat in a custom dick-shaped rocket. Edit Reddit never disappoints. My most upvoted comment ever is about a dick rocket. Thanks for the love. Astrophotography. The telescope is expensive enough but the camera, sheesh. Not really a hobby, but people that go to Disneyland Disney World at least once a year despite living several states away. All I remember from our one trip to Disneyland was my mom and I getting in a fight and her locking me out of the hotel saying, "I thought this was the happiest goddamn place on earth." We still laugh about it to this day. Lacrosse. For some reason. When I got to college and realized that no one else knew how to snowboard or wanted to go trap shooting with me, I had to adjust my hobbies to slacklining and frisbees. Racing of any real kind, whether it be quads, dirt bikes, mini sprints, etc. That shit is not cheap. Dolls. If they had an absurd amount of certain dolls and collect them they were rich. Especially if they still have them as an adult. Lady I babysit for has hundreds of dolls and an entire room filled with them. It's as creepy as it sounds. The whole room has its own insurance policy worth close to $1 million. That's how valuable it is. Most of these were collect when she was a child. When people say, especially anonymously, that one of their hobbies is travel, I get rich vibes off of that. Sometimes it's aspirational. But realistically if you're not rich you just don't have the money or availability to travel a lot. Being in the upper levels of competitive gymnastics. My daughter is only 6 and it already cost us $350 a month plus another $1,000 a year for travel and $450 a year for leotards, jacket, pants and bag. If she sticks to it into her middle high school years and keeps excelling we are looking at $1,000 a month for gym fees and booster club plus travel fees and uniforms, so probably closer to $1,500 a month. When you factor that stuff in, we are upper middle class and right now can afford it, but I'm not so sure about when she gets older and once our other kid gets into sports too. You definitely have to have some money to afford it. It's like paying for college. Car collection customization. As someone who plays golf, definitely golf, Eater, I'm aware that you can play golf for cheap. But the really dedicated folks who get top of the line equipment and use expensive balls because they broke 90 once definitely spend a shitload of money on golf and probably aren't super responsible with money. Hence that guy grew up rich.